Torah Ohr, and then eventually look at the Torah, the Parsha of this week's portion. So in this week's Torah Ohr, the Alter Rebbe writes like this. To understand the reason, to understand the reason why the creation of man, the formation of the human being, is different than formation and the creation of all other creatures. Similar to that all of the other creations with regards to the creation of the vegetative and the animal kingdom, the body of the animal and the vegetation was all created simultaneously. The body and the soul. Which the same thing also in the fifth day when it talks about the creation of the creepy crawly things, they were also created simultaneously. If you look in the creation story with regards to all the creation, when it speaks about the creation, it says like this, that let's say, for example, in chapter 1, Perek Aleph, verse Pasuk 20, that Hashem Elokim said, let the waters that were teeming up with life, let it sprout a living being, and it was so. Or, for example, when it talks about the creation of the animal kingdom, it says, "Vayomer Elokim," it's on the 6th day of creation. Toitzi Ohr is nefesh chaya lemina. Let the earth sprout, give out this living being, this animal, and vayichen, and it was so, which means that the body of the animal or the vegetation and its enlivening force were created simultaneously. So there's a distinction of these four things. The distinction is that these four ideas, there's four levels of creation. There's four levels in creation. There is what is called a doimim, an inanimate. The correct translation of doimim is not actually inanimate. The correct translation would be more silent. That's actually literally the translation of doimim is silent. The silent one, because it's not really inanimate. It does have animation, just the animation is silent, it's not observable. So when you look at a stone, for example, you don't see it teeming with life. But if you look through a microscope and you really look deeply into a stone, it is teeming with a lot of life. But it's silent. It means we don't see, it's not observable movement. That's one level. That's called the daimim. Underneath the daimim, beyond, on top of the daimim, is the world of the tzemeach. The world of tzemeach is the vegetation. And that, in the world of tzemeach, is, let's say, all the vegetation. And that also, in addition to having a nefesh, a soul that gives it life, it also has a soul, a nefesh, a living force that is a nefesh atzemachas, a force that gives it expansion. Beyond that is the nefesh chaya, beyond that is the animal kingdom, which is not only does it have a nefesh atzemachas, but it also has a nefesh amargeshes, or a sensing soul, or a type of murgash, a type of soul that can perceive through sight, through hearing, through touch, etc. And then there's the human being. So there's the vision of doimim tzemeach chayim adaber, inanimate or silent, which is that is the correct translation. Many years ago, when the Tanya was first translated by Rav Pinson, and he translated the word doimim as inanimate, and in parentheses he put silence. I think the Rebbe actually changed it around and said that really the translation should be really a silent one, and the parentheses should be inanimate, because really what the doimim represents is the inanimate creation, the silent creation. This schematic order of these four is a very ancient idea, not so much expressed in the works of Chazal, and Chazal itself, in the works of the Talmud, but later in the Rishonim, in the early commentators, this is expressed in great detail, and it was made famous by the Kuzri, who talks about these four, and speaks about even the fifth level. But these four madrigas, these four stages, sort of the evolvement of life. That life begins, or there's a process of life where life is inanimate or silent. It evolves into a higher state of its spiritual evolution to the level of tzemachas, which means it has a soul of expansion. Then it evolves even deeper into a world of a chaya, in the animal kingdom, and then it expands into the world of the human. These four stages represent four levels of spirituality as well, which is that the difference between these four is how much spirituality they have. That the definition of something physical, something that we say that something has a physical, something that's very physical, something that has physical properties. Something that has physical properties is really something that is defined by its time and its space. That's really what the definition of something that's physical. So it has a particular properties of time, which means it exists within a particular dimension of time, and has a particular dimension of space, which means it has a particular space to it. The definition of spirituality, of something that's ruchni, something that's beyond time and space, is that it doesn't have these parameters, so it expands. So when you look at a doimim, you look at a stone, the stone itself never expands. Now the mountains grow and there's an expansion to things, but that's because it's layered. That things layer itself on top of the stone, so the stone becomes bigger. But the stone itself doesn't actually expand. So in the world in the spiritual realm, the doimim, which is the inanimate, let's say for example a stone or a piece of metal, would represent that which is most physical, most dense. Again, we don't see life, we don't see expansion of that. A higher form of life, which is the world of tzemachas, which is vegetation, which means that it has a higher form of spirituality, because it has a soul that actually allows it to expand. That not only does it have its parameter, let's say a tree or flower or any type of growth, has a particular area where it exists, but then it expands outward, which means that it extends itself outside its own parameters, which means that it embodies a quality of spirituality, of growth. Then beyond that is the world of chaya, the world of the animal kingdom, because the animal kingdom, in addition to expanding, in addition to having a nefesh tzemachas, and it's important to understand that each of these four steps is inter-inclusive, which means that the second stage has also within it the first stage. The third stage has it with also the first and second, and the fourth has all three as well. So in the world of the animal kingdom, it has both a nefesh chayunis, which is the living, the life force that it allows it to exist, which is something that it shares in its relationship to the world of daimim, to the inanimate. It also has a nefesh tzemachas, which is a soul that expands. And this is debated amongst the Rishonim, amongst early commentators, between the Rambam and Rosh Gamliel and Even Ezra. There's different discussions whether there are three parts of one soul or three separate different souls, but that's for another discussion. But the idea is that in the chai, in the animal kingdom, there's also the nefesh chayunis, which is the living force, which is connected to the world of the daimim, to the inanimate or the silent. There's also a soul that's connected to the world of tzemachas, so therefore the animal expands, actually grows in its space. But it has an additional thing, which is actually not only does it expand in its space, but an animal can actually venture off, and it's not rooted in its ground, which means it can venture off to a different location. The idea of venturing off to a different location, as much as it moves, the fact that it could move and it can move out of its space represents a higher dimension of spirituality. In Likkutei Sichos is explained that. So what is the evolvement of the human being, just in terms of a medaber? So the fourth level is called a medaber, a creature of speech. So when it talks about and man became a living being, Hashem blew into his nostrils a breath of life, the Targum translates that means Ruach Mamala, a creature of speech. Or like Rashi says, Hadei Vadiber, someone that has now a day awareness, self-awareness, and the capacity to speech. The capacity to speech, as the Rebbe explains in Likkutei Sichos, is the idea of reaching out in communication with others. So that's a higher dimension of spirituality. So not only does the human being exist, which means that it has a doimim, a soul of the chayunas that gives it life. Not only does it have a tzemachas, a soul that gives it expansion. Not only does it has a consciousness that allows it to move about, but it also has a consciousness that not only could it move physically from one location to the other location, but it can actually enter into another person's space. Communication, dialogue, on the deepest level is that I could share my inner self with you. I can externalize from what's going on within me outside through the capacity of speech, and you can receive that through daya, through understanding, and you can receive me fully. So in dialogue, we actually transcend our space completely because I can enter you and you can enter me. Because that's a schematic idea of these four states or these four levels. So the question Alter Rebbe is asking in the Torah Ohr is the question is as follows. That when it talks about the creation of all the other creations besides man, it talks about them as they were created simultaneously. That the soul, which means the animating force, whether it's in the inanimate, the silent one, or within the vegetative, or within in the animal kingdom, the soul, like the Torah describes, is Teitza Aretz, that the earth gives rise to the animal, to this sheretz, this creepy crawly thing, gives rise to this form of life, and this form of life both has its body, its chomer, its substance, and its form, and its soul simultaneously. However, with the creation of man, however, with the creation of man, first man was created as a lump of clay, as the pasuk says, literally. Hashem took the earth from the ground, dust from the earth, which means that first there was a formation of the human being as clay, as earth. And this is more descriptive in Chazal, where the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, the Gemara talks about the Shor Shoynat Zavarafra, the Gemara talks about the different order of the day, that this happened in the first hour, the second hour, the third hour, or like, and also in the Pirkei Rebbe Lezer, it gives a more descriptive description of this, so which is that there was a process when man was created when he was just from the earth. First he was just created as just the clay, and then afterwards the Torah says, he blew into his nostrils a breath of life. So blowing into the nostrils a breath of life was already the second stage. So which means that man was created in a way that not that he arose in his beginning of his creation with a nefesh hachiyunis, with a enlivening force, and a medaberes, a force of speech. So this seems that the body of man, which is created initially without a soul, without any aliveness, so it seems that man is even lower than animal in that way, because the animal, the body of the animal, is created immediately with an investment of spirituality within it. That the body of the animal itself is in oneness with its spiritual constitution, which gives its growth. Where the creation of the human being is created as earth, and then God blows into his nostrils a breath of life and gives him a life force. So the Alter Rebbe explains, so we have to understand, why is this so? Why is this process this way? Because these four levels of the inanimate, the vegetative, and the animal kingdom, and the human being corresponds to the four letters of the name of Hashem. That the four letters of the name of Hashem, that the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Hadoimim kumayafar avonu mat cheshelem gidol. Doimim is the inanimate, is for example the idea of earth or stone or any types of metals which don't have any expansion. Tsemeach, the vegetative, are things like trees and grass. But then there's the animal kingdom, and then on top of that is the human being who has a nefesh hasichlis, who has a soul, an intellectual soul, which is nefesh hamidaberes, the day of a dibur. So the Alter Rebbe is not even talking here about the nefesh halikis, the divine soul. It's talking literally the definition of the human being as a human being. So why in all other creations did they rise simultaneously? This is because so Alter Rebbe says that the reason is because all other forms of creation the distinction between vegetation, for example, or something that's expanding, and metals in the stones, or the distinction between vegetation and animal, is a quantitative difference, not a qualitative difference. It depends how much life it's expressing. So the highest form of life that's expressing would be in the animal kingdom, which means that it's moving about and it's expanding in its own space. Its body is expanding, which represents a higher form of spirituality, more than a tzemech, a vegetation that's only just expanding in its body. But that's just a quantitative difference, which means that's in one level there's expressed, let's say, 50% of life force, and therefore it's just expanding, and then a little more life force is expressed, and therefore not only is it expanding, but it's actually able to move about. It starts moving freely, because that's the definition of spirituality, that's not rooted. So you have something that's inanimate, or of silent, but the inanimate is not actually really inanimate. The inanimate just has silent life, but the silent life is also teeming with life. There's particles, there's movement, it's totally alive. A stone is totally alive. It's just not expressive, that it doesn't expand outside itself. So the next stage of this expression, instead of just teeming with life within itself, which would be in the state of the inanimate, it expands outside of its borders, and then it becomes a vegetation. Okay, that's just, it's a quantitative difference, not a qualitative difference. It's just a quantitative difference that here the life force is just teeming within itself, and then it's being expressed outward. In contrast, the same thing would be with Samech and the Chai. The difference between the vegetation and the animal kingdom would be, in the animal kingdom it's expressed in the vegetative kingdom it's just expressed as an expansion within the body, and then the life force is so freeing for this object that all of a sudden not only does it expand in itself, we're in its space, but now it can just burst open and it can move into another space. But it's not a qualitative difference. With regards to the human being, the medaber, this is a qualitative difference, not just a quantitative difference, and therefore it doesn't emerge from the next step. In other words, the all other states, the doimim, the inanimate, eventually gives rise to the world of the tzemech, to the world of the vegetative. The vegetative gives rise to the world of the animal kingdom. And that's what the Torah actually says. That that the earth itself gives rise to the vegetation. The earth itself gives rise to the animal kingdom. Now, of course, this is divinely orchestrated. It's not just evolution, and it's not evolution. It's a divine orchestrated process of what we could call spiritual evolution of this life form. But this is an intended creation, and the intended creation is, but in the form of how this intended creation came about, is that it unfolds in a form of what we can call an evolutionary process, which one thing develops into the next, into a higher stage. That's in the process within the doimim, tzemech and the chai, within the inanimate, the vegetative, and the animal kingdom. But then there's a creation of the human being, just the level of human nefesh maskeles, the intellectual being, just the human, that which is a qualitative difference. It's a completely different creation. So therefore, there needs to be it can't emerge from the animal kingdom. The human doesn't emerge from the animal kingdom. The animal kingdom emerges from the vegetative. The vegetative emerges from the inanimate. But the human being has to have a separate creation. Therefore, it can't speak about, the Torah can't speak about, the Torah could, but that's not the way Hashem created the world this way. That Hashem created the world in this way, that the human is a new type of creation. It's a new bria. This is also what the Ramban writes, that the word bara, the word creation, is a bria shma'ayin, like a new form of creation. Therefore, it only appears itself 3 times in the story of creation. In the beginning of creation, which is a new creation, and Taninim Agdolim, which is another subject, the great serpents, and with the creation of man. Because creation of man is a new type of creation that doesn't evolve from the previous state. Therefore, there's no simultaneously combustion that comes out, that the earth gives rise to the vegetation gives rise to the animal. Or the inanimate, the metals and the stones eventually give rise to something that becomes alive and vegetative and growth. But it's a new type of creation. Therefore, the nefesh, the soul, the enlivening force, and the body are 2 separate things. The body itself, the body itself is actually completely inanimate. Because with regards to the animal kingdom, the body itself is not inanimate. The body itself, in the moment it arose as body, it already had life force, right? It was the nefesh chaya, it became a living being simultaneously. The body and its soul were one and the same. So therefore the body itself is part of the animal kingdom, part of the world of chayas. The tzemachas itself, the vegetation itself, every single form of vegetation, the body of the vegetation and the soul of vegetation are simultaneously arose, and therefore they're one and the same. However, the human being, the body itself is completely adoimim, completely inanimate, because it was created as afer, as complete a lump of clay with no life force. Why is that? Since the man is the tachlis abriya, is the ultimate crowning of creation. Because the intention of human being is lias. Because the intention of man's creation over creation is to elevate the sparks which fell. This is a tremendous big Kabbalistic construct, which is the idea that throughout the world there are divine sparks that need to be elevated in the world of the inanimate, in the world of the vegetation, in the world of the animal kingdom. And how does a human being do with his consciousness elevate creation? A person takes food to eat and garments to wear, and a person does with the awareness to serve Hashem, to serve the Creator. Therefore, he's elevating all of creation to a conscious service of creation. Which means that the world in itself, because it's not a sentient being, is world in itself, outside the human being, is not self-reflective as much as we understand. And the world outside the human being doesn't have the capacity to self-reflect and to have self-awareness, which means that's the highest level of das, of awareness. So therefore, the whole world in itself is doing exactly the will of the Creator. But when a human being does a mitzvah, does a positive mitzvah in the Torah, it does something positive and elevates this world, does something to serve Hashem with the things that they're engaged with in this world. Now they're doing with a level of consciousness, and they're serving Hashem with consciousness, which means that it's not only a paradigm of acher back to back, but it's a face-to-face relationship, which means that we're not just the recipients of Hashem's presence, of Hashem's life and Hashem's light, but we're actually in dialogue with Hashem because we're saying, I'm serving you, and therefore I'm connected to you consciously. So therefore, since the crowning purpose of creation is so man should elevate creation to a level of conscious, that the world should be consciously involved in its relationship with the Creator, to make a dir b'tachtonim, that's literally the idea of to make a dwelling place for Hashem's presence in this world. So how do we do this? So therefore, man was created with the doim, his body was created with completely inanimate. Why? So the Alter Rebbe gives an example. When a person wants to lift something from the ground, for example, a person wants to lift a home, a building, a structure. So if you lift a building from the middle of the home, the bottom itself, the foundations will be left in the ground. So how do you do this? You take a lever, and you put it on the bottom. And by putting the lever on the bottom of the home, or if you want to pick up a car, or whatever you want to do, you have to go to the bottom of it, and then through that you lift the entire thing. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, therefore, the neshama of a person, the soul of the person, enters into the body, which is a doimim, which this doimim, this inanimate object of the body, the physical body before the soul enlivens the body, is actually lower than the lowest of the creation. It's the lowest of creation because it has no life force, completely. It's completely dead. So therefore, it represents and embodies, because there's an interconnectivity, which is important to understand, because there's interconnectivity between every single thing in the creation, because every single human being, every single person is both a human being, and both has also a nefesh chiyunis, a nefesh that's connected to the animal kingdom, and also a nefesh tzemachas, a nefesh that's connected to the vegetation, also connected to the doimim, to the inanimate, because everything is inter-included, and within the human being, all these potentials are created within him. Therefore, the Torah says, Nasa Adam, let us create man. Who's us creating man? What's the plural in the creation? Hashem says, let us create man. So one of the ways to understand it, according to the Kodesh, is that what is the idea of Nasa Adam? Nasa Adam, let us create man, means Hashem is talking to all of creation and saying, let us create man. All of creation, Hashem, the Creator, with all of creation included, will create man. So man is the embodiment of all of creation because he has all of these elements within himself. And all in the macro of man, in the micro of man is included all the macro of the entire creation. That everything that's or in the language of Esther and Nassim, that kol that everything that exists within creation exists also with man. And there's like waters and represents lakes, and there's here that represents with grass. So the Chazal already see that the human being is an essential being, which is interconnected with everything of creation. So therefore, when a person therefore when a person elevates creation, they're elevating the entire creation, because a person has the lowest of the low, because his body comes to the lowest place from the complete inanimate. So when a person elevates himself, and they elevate their own doimim, their own inanimate, their own semech, their own vegetation, and their own chai, their own living being, and their own medaber, their own consciousness that directed towards to be over Hashem, to serve Hashem. So they're elevating the entire creation. Therefore, man is called a medaber. Why is man called a medaber, a creature of speech? That he's not only called a medaber because medaber means someone that can speak, that can communicate, but medaber also yidaber am tachtenu. Yidaber means yeah. So therefore, because a medaber means someone that's Yadar Tachtenu, someone that controls, so to speak. Now, what's the idea of the medaber? The medaber, the person that is creation of speech, means someone that's elevating and mastering all of creation, elevating the creation. So therefore, before when the Alter Rebbe said that the four states of creation, 4 grades of creation, which is the inanimate, the vegetative, and the chai, the living being, the animal kingdom, and the human kingdom, corresponds to the 4 levels of Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the Quantitative even, which represents the Yishay Eli, that the 4 levels correspond to these 4 madregas, these 4 states. So the highest level is Yud. Yud is connected to the medaber, and that Yud is particularly revealed specifically in the ground, in the earth. That this, the Alter Rebbe is saying like this, that the pasuk says b'chachma yasad haaretz, b'shemayim b'tfuna. So we have, on one hand, we have that the body is the lowest. On the other hand, we have that the soul is created from the highest. So the highest, and let's say we'll take the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the 4 letters in the name of Hashem. The Yud represents the highest madrega, the highest level, and the final level represents is the second hay. They also correspond in the world of spheres. Is that Yud corresponds to the level of Chachma, which is the beginning of the intuition. The upper hay represents the world of mind, of bina, of understanding, which is like a revealing of a certain type of intellect. The vav represents the place of the minas, the emotions. And the hay, the final hay, represents the physical world, the malchus. So we say that the human being is connected to the yud, but also connected to the final hay. Because now it's chilas and b'soifim. That the beginning is wedged in the end and the beginning. So what the Alter Rebbe is, the meaning is is as follows. In the world of a revelation, let's say a person has an idea. Let's say a person thinks, I'm going to compose a song. Or, I don't know, build a home, do something, physically do something. So the way it exists, the way creativity works is, first a person has an idea, a certain type of conception of the idea, a certain type of an intuitive idea of how this thing should look, how it should be presented. Then a person thinks about it, how am I going to materialize this idea? Then it's brought out into the emotions, and they start feeling about it, and they feel, okay, I'm going to do this and do that, or they actually go ahead and start doing it. And then there's the finalization of the product, which is the malchus, which is in its final product. So the finality of something is always rooted in the original conception. Let's say you're building a home, very simply. You're building a home. You have an idea how the home should look. Okay, that's this creative idea. Then you go ahead and you make plans how the home's going to look. So here's going to be the bathroom. Here's going to be the bedrooms. Here's going to be the steps. This is the way the structure of the home is. And then you're middle of building the home. If you walk into the home in the middle of it being built, you're not going to see the initial conception of how you saw the home to be built in its realization, because it hadn't come to fruition. Where are you going to see the finalization of the original conception of your idea when it's finally built? So the beginning of an idea is only materialized in its end, and the end is revealing what originally existed in the original. But here the Alter Rebbe is saying something even a little more deeper in terms of its relationship to how this works, in terms of our life, in terms of our spiritual practice, in terms of Avodas Hashem. That is the world of Gilui, the world of revelation, where something is emoting, something that's expressing. So in the vegetative kingdom, so you have two extremes. You have the element of the body which is completely inanimate, the daimon. You have the element of the soul, which is the medaber, the power of speech. And they enter the person in two different stages. First, the person exists as clay, as a physical body, as inanimate, and then they're given the highest level of soul, and then they come together and join. In between these two states, which is the inanimate and the medaber and the creature of speech, in the two states is the vegetative kingdom and the animal kingdom. In terms of the spheres, and in terms of the way the Alter Rebbe is understanding this, explaining this idea, is that in terms of revelation, where do you see life expressed? You see life expressed in vegetation, right? You look at a tree and it's flowering. You see life. That's a level of revealing. You look at an animal. You see an animal jumping. You see a monkey jumping around. You see life. Life is expressed fully in the world of vegetation, and even more fully in the world of chayas. Literally, we call it life. We call a chaya, we call a living being, an animal, we call something that has life, because you see life expressed in a life force. This is the world of revealed expression. But there's something deeper than that. So a revealed expression would be in our own life, in our own personal life, could be a certain type of thought that gives us an expansiveness of mind. We're thinking about connecting to Hashem. We're very mindful. We're very present. We're doing His baitinus. We're really meditating in our mind to understand the presence of Hashem in our lives. But it's a certain type of revealing of Hashem's presence within our mind. Then there's another type of expression which is revealed in our emotions, which I'm feeling love, I'm feeling awe of Hashem, I'm feeling Hashem's presence, which is all in the world of emotions. So in the world of expression, bina, which is the thought process, and midos, and the emotions, which correspond inwardly to the nefesh tzemachas and nefesh achiyunis, which correspond inwardly to the vegetative element within ourselves and to the animal element within ourselves, is brimming with life. That's what we see of the life in a person. We say this person is really a person that's really serving Hashem, a person that's really alive and really present and really awake in the presence of God. But then there's a deeper madrega, there's a deeper level, which is that level of chachma, level of deep intuition, of deep knowing, of deep connection, of deep dveikus. And sometimes the deep level of dveikus, the deep level of connection, is not expressed in an emotion. It's not like I feel a lot of love and I feel a lot of awe, or I'm understanding it, my mind is overwhelmed with thoughts. But it's just being in the moment, in a form of bittul, a form of nullification, that I'm just in the presence of Hashem, and I'm just aware of that on a very deep level of knowing, which is beyond the knowing of rationale or of the left brain. It's like a deep inner type of knowing of the right part of the brain, which is the chachma, which is the wisdom. When a person is connected to that level of chachma, where is that expressed? Where is that dveikus? Where is that real connection, that connectivity, that dveikus, that oneness is expressed, is not in an emotion, and is not even in thought. It's expressed in an action. If you're living with something, with a certain level of truth, the living of that truth is not expressed in how you feel about it, but how you do about it. And that's important to understand. That ultimately, if we're truly connected to some truth, and we're truly connected to Hashem in the context that Alter Rebbe is talking about, when we're truly connected with God, and truly connected on a level of dveikus of chachma, which is the yud, where is that expressed? That expresses is in our action, how we do it. I'll give you a similar, but a different type of metaphor. If a person is married and has a healthy relationship with his spouse, God willing, and wants to and wants to demonstrate his love and his reverence and his respect for his spouse. So it could be expressed in like an idea that they share. They can say nice things, they can express nice things, or they can show a certain emotion how they're experiencing it, which is beautiful, which is the world of in what it's saying here in Torah Ohr. This is the world of Giluim, a revelation, and it's beautiful. But the real way to show connection is in action. Are you living it? Not just expressing it, you're feeling it, and I'm understanding it. That's beautiful. But are you living it? Could you demonstrate your love or your connectivity in action? Not could you, are you? Are you demonstrating your connectivity in the world of action? If you're demonstrating your real connection with your spouse in the world of action, of actually doing things for them, that's a true demonstration of the true connection. Because the highest is always wedged in the lowest. The highest level of Chachma, the highest level of Yud, is not Tchilasam, Seifim, Seifim, Tchilasam. The edge is one in the beginning, and in the end. So this to wrap it up, this is what the Alter Rebbe is telling us, is teaching us. Now, why is the Yetziras Adam, why is the creation of man different from all the creation of all other creations? Which the creation of all of creations is that they arise simultaneously. The life force and the body arise simultaneously, whereas with the creation of man, first the creation of man exists as a lump of clay, and then additionally was given a life soul, because the contrast between these two is not just a quantitative difference, but it's a qualitative difference. It's a much higher level of spirituality. It's actually in the highest level of nefesh hamaskelah, it's even nefesh halikis. Person's is connected to a neshama, to a soul that's a chelik el al mamish, is a part of the divine, literally a part of the divine. Literally, Alter writes in Tanya. So this is the highest madrega of the levels. This is the highest level of the soul. But the soul, because it's such a high level, where is it revealed? Specifically in what the lowest level is, because the edge, the beginning is always connected to the end. And the end is always connected to the beginning. And the intention of this combination of these two things is because since the human being is interconnected with everything of creation, everything that exists in the microcosm exists in the macrocosm, everything in the outside exists with inside, and everything is interconnected. So when a person elevates himself and lives a higher existence and lives a higher life, a hecher life, someone that lives connected and connected and with dveikus and yearning to be connected, to serve Hashem correctly, and to Mekadosh Hashem Shemayim, to sanctify Hashem's name in this world, to elevate this world, to create this world of Divrei Tachtonim, to create this world, and Hashem's presence should be revealed in a very open way. This person lifts the entire world. And not only are they lifting themselves, but they're lifting the entire world simultaneously.